3 weeks ago, he stood on a stage in Paris and delivered a speech entirely in French. They said it wasn't really Jim Carrey. They said he'd been replaced. They analyzed his eyes, his cheekbones, the way his forehead didn't move like it used to. Now, on this particular morning at The View, Joy Behar decided to resurrect every cruel whisper and baseless accusation. She wanted to know if it was really him. She wanted to know what he'd done to his face. She wanted to expose whatever she imagined was hiding behind that frozen forehead. What she didn't expect was that the man sitting across from her had been studying human nature his entire career. And he was about to give her a masterclass in exactly what happens when you confuse cruelty for curiosity. Subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you're about to witness is the moment Jim Carrey reminded the world why he's been a genius all along. The View studio felt charged with anticipation when Jim Carrey walked onto the set. At 64 years old, he moved with the easy grace of someone who had long ago stopped caring what anyone thought of him. His jet-black hair fell to his shoulders, longer than most people remembered. His face was smoother, yes, but his eyes still held that familiar spark of mischief that had made him a star. His smile was warm as he greeted the hosts, though those who knew him well might have noticed a certain guardedness that hadn't been there in his younger, more exuberant days. Whoopi Goldberg embraced him like an old friend. Sarah Haynes practically glowed. The audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly a minute, a testament to how much they had missed seeing him. Even Joy Behar clapped, though her smile seemed calculated, her eyes already scanning him with something that looked less like welcome and more like assessment. "Jim Carrey, welcome to The View," Whoopi announced as the applause faded. "It's been way too long since you've been here." "Thank you, Whoopi. It's good to be back among the living. Although apparently some people aren't sure I'm actually living." The joke landed perfectly, the audience laughing at his self-aware reference to the clone conspiracy. But Joy's expression didn't change. She was waiting for something. "Let's talk about that César Award," Sarah jumped in warmly. "Delivering your entire speech in French. That must have taken months of preparation." Jim's face softened at the memory. 8 months of working with Gregory Collier from the César Academy. Every word, every pronunciation. I wanted to honor the moment properly. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was born in Saint-Malo, France. 300 years ago, he left for Canada, and eventually his family ended up in Ontario, where my father was born. Standing on that stage, speaking in French, I felt like I was completing a circle that started centuries ago. "That's beautiful," Whoopi said. "And you had your whole family there." "My daughter Jane, my grandson Jackson, and Min Ah, the people who matter most to me. It was one of the best nights of my life." "Speaking of that night," Joy interjected, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Let's address the elephant in the room. You looked different, very different. People online were saying it wasn't even you, that you sent a body double, or a clone. Some people think you've been replaced entirely. Even Megan Fox and Katy Perry were commenting on it." The mention of specific celebrities reacting to the conspiracy added weight to the accusation. The question landed like a stone in still water. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. But Jim's expression remained remarkably calm, almost amused. Megan Fox said she couldn't handle any more stress and needed to know if it was real. Katy Perry posted a bullseye emoji. A drag artist named Alexis Stone posted photos of a prosthetic mask suggesting she had impersonated me. And somehow, all of this became more newsworthy than the actual honor I received. He paused, letting the absurdity of his own words sink in. "I've heard the theories. They're creative, I'll give them that. But Joy, I have to ask you something. Do you actually believe I was replaced by a clone? Or are you just stirring the pot for ratings?" The directness caught Joy off guard. "I'm asking questions that viewers want answered." "Are they? Or are you amplifying conspiracy theories that hurt real people because controversy is good for business?" Joy's face tightened. I'm simply noting that your appearance has changed dramatically. People are curious about why. People age, Joy. It's a thing that happens to everyone except, apparently, Paul Rudd. I'm 64 years old. I've been out of the spotlight for years. Did people expect me to look exactly the same as I did in The Mask? That was 30 years ago. But it's more than aging, isn't it? Joy pressed, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in her eyes. Plastic surgeons have been weighing in. They're talking about brow lifts, blepharoplasty, fillers, Botox. One estimate put the work at $60,000. Care to comment? The studio fell silent. Jim was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. You want me to comment on what strangers think I might have done to my face based on photographs they analyzed from their living rooms? Surgeons who have never examined me, diagnosing procedures through a screen? They're experts in their field. They're experts at speculation. And you're an expert at turning speculation into entertainment. But let me ask you something, Joy. When was the last time someone dissected your appearance on national television? When was the last time strangers debated whether your face was real? Whether you were actually you? Joy's composure flickered. This isn't about me, isn't it? Because what I'm hearing is that a 64-year-old man who stepped away from public life, who spent years painting and sculpting and trying to find peace, committed the crime of looking different when he came back. And now I'm supposed to justify my face to you? To explain every line that's not there and every contour that's changed? He shook his head slowly. I'm not going to do that, because my face is my business. What I do or don't do to maintain my appearance is between me, my mirror, and anyone I choose to tell. It's not content for your show. It's not fodder for internet detectives. It's my life. Joy tried to regain control. But when you're a public figure, you forfeit your right to privacy? Is that what you're saying? Because I seem to remember a time when that logic was used to justify some truly horrific invasions of celebrities' personal lives. And I seem to remember that we decided, as a society, that maybe that wasn't okay. The audience was completely still now, hanging on every word. Let me tell you something about the clone theory, Jim continued, his voice taking on an edge. My daughter was sitting in that audience in Paris. My grandson, who I love more than anything in this world, was watching me accept the highest honor of my career. My girlfriend Minna, who I thanked publicly for the first time because I finally felt safe enough to share that part of my life, was there holding my hand. His voice dropped but somehow carried more power, and people on the internet decided that moment was fake. That I wasn't really there. That somehow, despite 8 months of preparation, despite my family sitting right in front of me, despite Michel Gondry, who I've worked with for decades, hugging me backstage, it was all an elaborate hoax. He looked directly at Joy. Do you have any idea how that feels? To have one of the most meaningful moments of your life reduced to a conspiracy theory? To have strangers analyze your grandson's expression to see if he was acting like he knew his real grandfather? Joy was visibly uncomfortable now. I'm not endorsing the conspiracy theories, You're just giving them a platform. You're just legitimizing them by treating them as worthy of discussion on national television. There's a difference between asking hard questions and amplifying nonsense, Joy. And you've been on the wrong side of that line for the last 10 minutes. Sarah Haynes tried to intervene. Jim, we're all so happy to have you here. And I think what you said about your family was beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm not angry. Not really. I'm tired. I'm tired of a culture that treats celebrities like specimens to be dissected. I'm tired of a media ecosystem that rewards cruelty over curiosity. And I'm tired of sitting across from people who should know better, watching them choose clicks over compassion. He turned back to Joy. You know what the really sad part is? You could have asked me about the César speech itself, about what it meant to trace my family back to France, about my father, Percy Joseph Carey, who I called the funniest man I ever knew in front of the entire French film industry, about the art I've been creating, The paintings and sculptures that have given me more joy than any movie ever did. His voice softened. You could have asked me about finding love again after losing someone I cared about in the worst possible way. About my daughter becoming a mother and making me a grandfather. About what it feels like to step away from fame and discover that you're still a person underneath all the characters. He gestured toward her. But instead, you asked me if I'm a clone. You asked me to justify my face. You treated the most meaningful moment of my recent life as fodder for conspiracy theories. That's not journalism, Joy. That's not even entertainment. That's just sad. The word sad hung in the air like a judgment. Joy's face was flushed now, her composure cracking visibly. I think you're being overly sensitive, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Jim laughed, and it was the laugh that had made him famous, the one that could shift from manic to melancholic in a heartbeat. Overly sensitive. That's what we call it now when someone doesn't want their appearance mocked on television? When someone objects to conspiracy theories being treated as legitimate news. I've been called a lot of things in my career, Joy. Crazy, difficult, washed up. But overly sensitive for not wanting to explain my face to you? That's a new one. He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. You know what I've learned in 64 years? The people who call others sensitive are usually the ones who can't handle being challenged. The people who hide behind just asking questions are usually the ones who don't want to be held accountable for the damage those questions cause. I'm not causing damage. I'm doing my job. Your job is to inform and entertain. What you've been doing for the last 15 minutes is neither. It's harassment disguised as curiosity. It's cruelty pretending to be journalism. Joy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to sit here and be lectured. No, you don't. But you chose to attack me, Joy. You chose to bring up clone theories and plastic surgery rumors instead of having an actual conversation. You made that choice. And now you're upset that I'm not playing along. Joy looked around the studio, at her co-hosts who weren't coming to her defense, at the audience who sat in stunned silence, at the cameras that were capturing every moment of her unraveling. This interview is over for me, she announced, removing her microphone. Of course it is, Jim said quietly. Because that's always how it ends, isn't it? When the subject fights back, when they don't collapse under the pressure, suddenly you're the victim. Suddenly you're the one who needs to walk away. He shook his head, something almost like sympathy in his eyes. I've played a lot of characters in my life, Joy. I've been the hero and the villain, the fool and the sage. But the character you're playing right now, the righteous crusader who can dish it out but can't take it, that's a role that doesn't end well. Trust me, I've seen how that movie ends. Joy walked off the set, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Jim watched her go with an expression of calm curiosity, like he was observing a particularly interesting species of animal. Well, Whoopi said after a long pause, that was something. Jim turned to her with a gentle smile. I'm sorry for the drama, Whoopi. I really did come here hoping to talk about art and family and maybe some good memories, but I'm not going to apologize for defending myself. Not anymore. I spent too many years letting people say whatever they wanted about me. I'm done with that. Sarah Haynes nodded, clearly moved. For what it's worth, your Cesar speech was beautiful. When you talked about your father teaching you the value of love, generosity, and laughter, I cried. He was the funniest man I ever knew. Everything good about me came from him. The comedy, the need to make people laugh, the belief that joy is a form of rebellion against a world that wants us to be miserable. That's all him. He paused, looking into the camera. You know, people ask me why I stepped away from acting. Why I retired, then unretired for Sonic, then retreated again. And the truth is, I got tired of being Jim Carrey. Capital J, capital C. The brand. The phenomenon. The guy who had to be on all the time. His voice grew quieter. I wanted to remember who I was before all of that. The kid from Newmarket, Ontario, who used to make funny faces in the mirror to cheer up his sick mother. The teenager who dropped out of school to support his family when they were living in a van. The young comic who bombed so hard in his first performances that he wanted to quit forever. He smiled, and it was a real smile, not a performance. That's who I found when I started painting, when I started sculpting, when I stepped away from the cameras and just existed. I found the person underneath all the masks. And you know what? I like that person. He's quieter than Jim Carrey the movie star. He's sadder sometimes. But he's real. And that's worth more than any box office record or award. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes bright with something that looked like passion. Do you know what it's like to spend 40 years being a commodity? To have your face be worth millions of dollars? To know that every expression you make is being analyzed for its market value? I spent so long being the product that I forgot I was a person. The paintings reminded me. When I put brush to canvas, nobody cares if Jim Carrey made it. They only care if it's good. That's freedom. That's what I was looking for all along. He looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching who's being attacked online, who's being told they're fake or different or wrong for simply existing, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone an explanation for who you are. You don't have to justify your face, your body, your choices, your existence. The people who demand those explanations are usually the ones who can't face themselves in the mirror. The studio erupted in applause. Not the polite applause of a talk show audience, but something raw. Something that sounded like recognition. In the days that followed, the interview would become a cultural moment. Jim Carrey destroys clone conspiracy with grace would trend on every platform. His words about finding the person underneath the masks would be quoted by artists, actors, and ordinary people who had ever felt reduced to their public image. The clip of him saying, "My face is my business," would become a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been dissected by the internet. Joy Behar would return to the show the next day without addressing what had happened. When pressed by critics, she would insist her questions were legitimate journalism about public interest. The defense would only fuel the backlash, as clip after clip of Jim's measured, devastating responses circulated online. Gregory Collier from the César Academy would release another statement, this time more pointed. Jim Carrey spent 8 months preparing to honor our ceremony. What he received in return was conspiracy theories and mockery. That says more about our culture than it does about him. Michel Gondry, Jim's longtime collaborator who had directed him in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, would post a simple message. I hugged my friend Jim in Paris. It was him. It has always been him. The man who can make you laugh until you cry and cry until you laugh. Stop looking for imposters and start appreciating what you have while you have it. And Jim would return to Hawaii, to his paintings and his girlfriend, and his quiet life far from the cameras. He had said what he needed to say. He had defended himself without losing his dignity. And he had reminded the world that the man behind the rubber face and manic energy was in the end just a human being, asking to be seen for who he really was. That was the real Jim Carrey, not the clone, not the plastic surgery patient, not the washed-up actor clinging to relevance. Just a man from Canada who had made the world laugh for 40 years and had finally learned that the most important audience was himself. And who had proven, on live television, that wisdom and kindness could be the most devastating weapons of all. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line? Or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.